Okay, let's begin with your name and where and when were you born?
My name is Mark H. Doren. I was born in 1919, uh, just outside of Kent City, Michigan.
What was your early schooling like? Elementary school and
Well, schooling was quite different than it is today. We walked better than a mile to school every day.
now is that true? Or are you just saying that because your son is here?
Yeah, he's. Um, I think he can verify that.
Okay.
But it was an old country school,
Okay.
an old two-room school, and I started in the first grade or kindergarten and went on up with the rest of them.
Mhm.
And I, at school we didn't have snow days. We had snow, but no snow days, and we just kept going. The uh, the the lessons were so different from what I understand today and from what our grandchildren are facing.
Mhm.
But an old country school, and either you got your lesson or you stayed after and got it, and then you walked home with the teacher. And anybody that had to walk home with the teacher wasn't looked on too kindly. That was a bad omen.
Mm.
So we did a pretty good job of getting our work done.
Good. How
And
was high school?
I started in high school in Comstock Park, and high school wasn't an easy one. And so I didn't complete high school. I
What year was that when you just dropped out of school?
hmm.
Was it already 1940s?
Oh no.
Okay.
No,
All right.
before that.
Yeah.
Yeah, way before that.
So you just went to work?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Uh, we had we lived right in the farm area, and there was four of us boys, and we always was working for the farmers,
Mhm.
all summer long. And then come harvest time, and we'd work on the farms.
Hold on a second. That's real loud. All right, so you were talking, we on? You were talking about working for farmers, but at a certain point, a major event happened, and it was called Pearl Harbor. Where and when were you there?
Well, I was at that time when Pearl Harbor happened. I was working. Uh, my my childhood come up through a trial and error sort of a system. I've always had mechanics in my mind, and I started even at home. We were fixing cars as kids, and so it was always kind of a second nature for me. And I was trying to think what I was working at when Pearl Harbor hit.
Well, it was a Sunday, so
It was a Sunday.
you were having dinner with.
We was having dinner at the in-laws.
Oh, okay.
I was married at that time, so I got a
Ah.
feeling I was working as a mechanic. I worked for Chevrolet as a mechanic for a number of years, and I think that's probably what I was doing when that happened.
That's interesting. My father was a mechanic.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he was in 1941. He was working at a garage,
Yeah.
fixing cars.
Well, that was my passion for
Wow.
years,
Yeah, my dad too.
and I did until I started getting headaches,
Oh,
and the fumes and the stuff kind of got me.
sure.
And then in 1942, I went into Grand Rapids and started working for Sackner Products.
How come the military hadn't come calling on your door?
Well, they had, to the extent that everybody had their name down,
Mhm.
and but my number hadn't come up.
Oh, okay.
So
So what was your reaction? What was the reaction of the family to hearing about Pearl Harbor? I assume you heard it on the radio.
yeah, well, everybody, I think that everybody kind of felt the same. Boy, what's going to happen now? We've never had a thing like that happen before, and so everybody was real concerned about what was going to happen next. And
One of the things other vets have told me is that soon afterwards there was a noticeable exodus of men.
there was.
So
And
you
that's-
noticed that as well. That there's
Oh
just-
yeah, and that's why I said I my buddies was all gone, you know. So you go to church and you look around and all you had was the women there and some of the older guys. But the company that I worked for, I was working then. I wound up in the machine shop there, and we was doing defense work. I was making parachute cord, and I maintained the equipment that braided the cords.
So that's why they didn't grab you right away.
Well, yeah, and I got a deferment.
Yep, yep.
And the personnel said, Mark, you wanted me to put in for deferment. And I said, well, that's up to you. I said, if I gotta go, I will.
Now, did you have brothers? Did you have other relatives that went already?
Yeah, I had two brothers that were already in. One was already, he went to New Guinea, that area in Australia, and the other was in the Air Corps. He wound up here stationed in Italy.
But soon afterwards, I take it, you did get a letter in the mail or letting you know that your Uncle Sam wants you?
Yeah, I got the invitation that I'd been chosen by my friends and neighbors. So I went down to the draft board with the personnel man that night, and it was a little bit ironic. My uncle was sitting on the draft board at that time. He was a banker in Sparta. And of course he couldn't say anything because of me, but the personnel man tried to tell him what I was doing and the work that we were doing, defense work. So I said, well, he said, the draft board didn't ask me any serious questions, you know. And finally, one big guy, he sat there, and I can almost see him yet. And he leaned way back in his chair, and he had a piece of this braided rope that was made in a parachute cord. And he grabbed that, and he peeled it up, and he pulled it a little bit, and he says, well, Doren, you better be sure that this is pretty good stuff, because you might need it. I thought, what a send-off, you know. I'll never forget that. But so they didn't put in for a second deferment. So then I went.
Let me ask you what may be a stupid question. Did you want to go?
In a sense, yeah.
Because I know a lot of guys I've talked to, they were ready to go.
Well, I was in a sense, but there was some other factors in my life that added up. I was married and had 3 children.
Yeah, that is a big factor.
Yeah.
So what was the process of getting into the military? Was it the Army? Did you get into the Army?
Well, yeah. That was funny, you know, you go through one indoctrination and physicals and all that, and finally it come down to the last one, and it was comical because of course here you are, a whole bunch of guys all lined up, all doing the same thing, all look alike, you know, and you go up to the desk and the guy says, Doren, what branch of service would you like to serve in? I said, well, if it's all right with you. And I always had an itching for the Air Corps. And I said, oh, I'd like to go in the Air Corps. And he had 3 big stamps here on the counter. And he grabbed the stamp and he plunked her down and he said, well, he said, more of them are going in the Army today. So there I went. And that settled that. No arguments.
So what was the next process? Did you went home, got your belongings?
Yeah, the final day came, and things were different then. You know, now they go down to the airport and fly away, and we come down to the old Union Station, which was right over here, and got on the train and took off. We didn't have a slightest idea where we was going, and the only thing was one of the back at the draft board again, they needed somebody to carry the records for this whole group that was going. And so I was an honorary sergeant there for the time being, and I don't know how I got picked for that, but so I had all the records, and that, you know, that bothered me a little bit, if I was to be responsible for a bunch of guys. And the first time that train stopped, they headed for town, you know. these guys jumped right off the train. You know, they could care less what happened. And but we finally wound up down in Florida. So I took my basic training in Florida.
Well, let's try and visualize what you saw when you got off the train. You're still in your civilian clothes.
Yeah.
It's a whole train full of draftees.
Yeah.
What am I seeing when I got off the train at this training area?
Well, you kind of seen a bunch of lost sheep, you know. Yeah, we had our civilian clothes on. Then we wind up in the Army barracks, you know, and
Was this a big place?
yeah, you know,
Is it kind of what you think of from the movies? You got people marching around, you got noise going on, big American flag somewhere.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and all the options of an Army camp. And so we marched through and drew our clothes. Well, to direct clothes, they take a look at you. What size do you wear? Well, whatever they threw at you, that's what you wear. And the shoes, you walked up and stuck your feet in a couple of shoes and grabbed 2 buckets of sand and picked them up, and the guy stood there and he fell to your feet, you know, see, and that was your shoe size. And mine never changed until combat was over. I never could change my shoe size. Once it was on the record, that was it. And I'd go to the supply house and try to get a different size, and they wouldn't listen. This is what your number is, and so that's what it is. But then we went back to the barracks and took our civilian clothes off. They gave us a big bag, and the shipping address and everything was there, and so we shipped them back home again. That took care of my civilian clothes.
Was there a drill sergeant there?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Was he what you commonly think of, yelling in your face and all that?
Well, yeah, some good and some bad.
Mm-hmm.
It all depended on their voice, and I never had a problem with drills. I kind of liked the cadence of close order drill, and but
What was a typical day like in the very beginning of basic training? You got up around 10 o'clock in the morning, had some coffee, right? Leisurely walked out to...
yeah, walked out in your pajamas. Yeah, I don't know what time it was, but all of a sudden you heard a holler and it said roll out, and we had about 2 minutes to be in the company street with our clothes on, standing at attention, and that's the way it started. And the temperature down there, now this was early in the spring, so now the temperature started to coming up in Florida, and I never had a problem with temperature because I was used to heat. I worked out in the hot weather, but some of the guys really suffered from that. They drop out of marches and things like that.
So basically you're getting up, there's probably calisthenics
Yeah,
initially
every
on.
morning, every morning.
And what about the chow line?
Well, we do go through the calisthenics and whatever right in the company area, and then we'd hit back to our barracks and for a minute, and then they hollered chow, and then there was a mass erosion. Everybody head for the chow hall, and I don't know why it was. Seemed like he was always hungry. So regardless of what the chow was, which wasn't so good sometimes, we always ate. And
So after a period of time marching left, right, all that kind of stuff, was there any kind of tests that you had to take, written tests, to figure out, you know, what your skills were?
yeah, we time and time again we went through this, and every time I went through a test, mine always headed toward the mechanical side of it, I'm afraid, because and that's the one reason I went to Camp Blanding in Florida. At that time, that was a specialist school or training camp, and they had radio engineers and mechanics, and so the thought was that you had your basic training, which whatever weeks those were, then you went to specialist school, and I thought, well, this is going to be fine. I don't mind this. I learned later it was quite different, but so we went through our basic training. Just as we was finished the basic training, in the Army camp there's always rumors. Well, this rumor, and then the big joke was what stool did that come off of? You know, all of a sudden, you know, the latrines or the toilets were just one long row of stools, and say, well, what stool did that come off of? As though somebody sitting there and thought of something. But the rumor will come that the camp was going to be changed from specialist to something else. And so on a Friday afternoon, this became a little stronger, and then Monday morning we found ourselves in another part of the camp. All specialist training had been done away with, and everything was going to be infantry and heavy weapons. So I was a bit disappointed, I guess, thinking I was going to lose out on something. But the ironic part of it was I never could get that out of my, it was on my papers, see? And even up to the time that I was assigned to a company in combat, the old man or the captain said to me, Doren, I understand you've been a mechanic. Well, apparently that record followed me, you know. So be careful what you do, because it'll follow you, Frank. But
during that period of time, basic and then in the specialty school, did you have any understanding what was going on in the war? I mean, either through newspapers, radio, talking to other guys?
Just radio and newspapers, that's all we had. We knew that this is when the Germans really started stirring things up over there. And so we knew that things weren't good. And that's why they needed the heavy weapons and infantry. Yeah.
So you started training then as an infantryman?
Yeah, well, your basic covered a lot of things.
Sure.
It even covered infantry, and it covered a certain amount of weaponry,
Mm-hmm.
and it covered reconnaissance. And one thing that we always said, boy, I hope I never get assigned to a reconnaissance outfit, because that didn't look like fun at all. And and that backfired, because that's where I wound up, in a reconnaissance outfit. But it worked out all right.
So the reconnaissance has specific training then, right? Special kind of training?
Yeah, yeah. You'd have a week of this and then a week of something else. So we got a little bit of everything during basic training, yeah.
Okay. So once you completed that, where did you go from there?
Well, we came home for a short leave,
Oh.
and then we headed overseas.
This is kind of a delicate question, but you know, you got a wife and 3 kids. When you came home, she was aware, right, that you were going to be going off to somewhere?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That must have been a tough one. What did you get assignments? I mean, did you get a letter in the mail saying you're to report to a certain place at a certain time?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, they kept us posted where we had to be and when we had to be there.
Okay.
So we get back on the train again. Here we go.
Wow. So where did you end up?
Well, I wound up over at on the East Coast. Camp Miles Standish was a staging area for overseas,
Okay.
and we wound up over there.
And because of that, you figured out you're going to Europe, right? Because if you would have been on the West Coast, you probably would have been off to the Pacific.
That's right.
Yeah.
We had a feeling Europe was
Okay.
was our destination. Yeah.
All right. So you're at Camp Standish, Miles Standish. You got on the boats by the time? You loaded onto...
No, we were just. It was a big camp there.
Oh, okay.
It was a big camp there, right back to the old barracks again. So we were in barracks, and even while we were there, we had to go through the calisthenics in the morning, and then we had a lot of close sort of drill there, and I said I kind of enjoyed that in a way. It was a cadence thing, and so they found out we was having fun doing that. So then they sent an officer out there to instruct us instead of one of the guys. So they do the best to take the fun out of it. And
were you still a private? You're private at this time?
well, I wasn't anything. I was private, yeah. That's about as far down the totem pole as you could get. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So this staging area then was designed to get ready to finally board a ship
Right.
to go over. So you finally got orders, you got to get on a ship somewhere.
Yeah.
What did this ship look like?
Well, we went over on a pretty good sized one. It was actually it had been a luxury liner, SS Washington, I think, and I think since then it's been scrapped, and it was converted into a troop ship. And like everything else, the Army's going to use every square inch of it. So, and offhand, I don't know how many thousand was on that ship, but it was packed. Down below, it was just stacks of racks, and you slept on a rack.
Yeah.
And
Had you ever been on a ship before?
not like that, no.
Okay.
No.
But you've been on the water before?
Well, I'd been on, small lakes. Never
Okay.
been on the ocean
Okay.
before, no.
All right.
So that
So-
was a new experience.
I was just going to say, what was your stomach's reaction to that?
Well, be honest with you, on the way over, it was fine. It was coming back when I thought we was going to have a good time that everything went bad for me.
Okay, we'll cover that later
Yeah.
on.
but,
So this is not an unusual. Actually, sometimes the guys went over in troop ships. Some of them went over in really miserable. But this was a luxury line, a converted luxury liner.
That's right.
So it wasn't as bad as it probably could have done.
well, it was better than a lot of them, I think. Some of the smaller ones, and then they went over as a convoy. And what really kind of spooked us, a kid that was my buddy, we were down in a chow line that you didn't sit down to eat, you stood up to eat. You just went through the line and got your stuff and stood up by a table and filed out the other side, and the next line kept coming. So it was a continuous process to feed that many guys. But we eating late in the afternoon, and my buddy said, "Hey," he said, "this thing's moving." And we looked out, and you could see the docks going by. So I thought, well, they'd probably pull out of the harbor and sit for the night or something, and then form a convoy, because most of them went over in convoys. And so we went up on deck. We finished eating, run up on deck. We stood there and we watched New York Harbor disappear, and that thing kept right on steaming along. And come dark, and it was still going. And so we finally just kind of crawled in our bunks, and the next morning that thing is still steaming along all by itself out here. We had an airplane come out, and that's when they, you talk about difference in communication. Come out with a flasher type, and circled that ship 3-4 times and did all the flashing they needed. Apparently got the correspondence done, and but that we sailed right across there all by ourselves. And at night when we stood on the deck, the waters in the back that left the trail, pretty good trail, and you could see it, and that would change course every so often. So it was a zigzag course, and we learned later that they figured that it took so long for a U-boat to get a sighting on you, and by that time they changed course. So they did this all the way over to just outside of England.
So where did you arrive?
Off the coast of England, 5 days later. It only took us 5 days to get over, but we just off the coast of England. We pulled into an area. It was sort of a big bay. I don't know what the name of it was, but immediately when we come up on deck, we found we'd kind of been surrounded with some protective ships around us. There was protective aircraft, and later we found out that was the home base for a lot of the subs that was looking for us. And then we went from there. We went down to Liverpool, England, and that's where we got off the ship.
Got off the ship.
Yeah.
Were you herded into barracks, or where did you go?
In England?
Yeah, in Liverpool.
In Liverpool, well, England is just like you often hear about, nothing but fog and rain and wet, and it was in tents. And here was, it looked like marble slabs, I don't know what it was, but on the floor. And as you walk on the floor of that, it'd squish. You know, there was water underneath it. And it wasn't exactly warm. It was, now it's November. And we had they gave us there was a charcoal burner there. No charcoal in it, or no fire in it, but just a charcoal burner. Well, how do you start charcoal? And I remember we went to the restroom or the latrines there and pulled some of the signs down, split it up with our knives and got the fire started. And one guy said, I'll keep this going all night, so I'll stay up, keep the fire going. And we was just sleeping on old army cots. And he fell asleep. He got warm, fell asleep. We woke up, and I thought rigor mortis had set in. I was just so stiff I couldn't hardly move. And then we went to the makeshift mess hall, and they had hard-boiled eggs, and they were so hard that they'd cracked, you know, so part of the egg was coming out of the shell. That was one thing we had, and the coffee was sort of a green color. You know, you took one look at it and thought, oh my gosh, can I down this? So that was our introduction to Army life in England.
So what was your first responsibility? What did you have to do first? I mean, besides, you know, sleeping and eating, and what were you doing next?
What we did, I didn't have much responsibility as far as being responsible, other than doing what you're told, you know. And the calisthenics, they still worked us.
Okay, so you're still just kind of in transition, waiting. Okay.
Yeah.
Were there any indications of where you're going to go and what you're going to be doing?
Not a clue.
Okay.
And everybody had got to the place where they waited for the day when they'd be assigned to an outfit, so they belonged to somebody. Right now, we were referred to as repo-depos. And so you were just a replacement. You were herded in like a bunch of sheep. And from here to there, wherever they needed it, that's where they shoved you. Yeah.
So where did you finally get assigned?
Oh, it was not until I was in Germany.
Really? So
Yeah.
you're going from Liverpool, you're still part of the Repo Depot?
Yeah, yeah. And then we were there in Liverpool for a while, and then we finally crossed over to running the English Channel.
It's all right.
But anyway, then we were put on a little ship, and that was an interesting experience because they took us off the ship. It was too small to do calisthenics on, and I don't know how many of us were packed on there. So they took us to a big warehouse, and the fog was so thick that one morning that they ordered everybody to put your hand on the shoulder of the guy in front of you. And I remember marching down through there, and literally it was like walking with your eyes shut until we got in this warehouse. And that's where we did our calisthenics. And we got back on that ship, and now all we had was some rations. There was no kitchen, no sleeping quarters. We slept right on the deck. And I talked with one of the shipmates there, and I said to him, I said, man, you got anything down inside that we can sleep in at all? And I don't know, maybe he thought I looked like I needed help. So he befriended my buddy and I, and he says, stick around here till after dark. And he said, I'll come up and get you. So he come up and got us at dark, took us down, and we slept down in the hold of the ship. And we had some hammocks tied to the pipes in the ship. And that was my first experience sleeping in a hammock. And you got to be careful, you'll go right out the other side, they'll roll right over. And so we slept down in there, so we lucked out on that for a couple nights. And finally they got us across the English Channel to Le Havre, France.
Now, this is, I assume, after D-Day.
Yeah.
This is so that the
Yeah.
beach has been secured in, about what year is this?
44.
Oh, 44 now.
This will be
okay.
late in 44.
Okay,
yeah.
okay. All right.
And the harbor had been pretty well bombed out at Le Havre, so there was no dock or anything to come up to. So they had a big crane there, and they lifted a huge gangplank up, and set it up on the side of the ship, and it ran down to the ground, and it was so steep that if you'd ever fallen, you just rolled the rest of the way. But here you are with your barracks bag and everything that you own. That's
So you're not hooked up with a pack and gun and all that. You just got
No,
a
no.
barrack. Okay, just a barracks bag.
just a big barracks
Okay,
bag.
all
We
right.
didn't. Yeah, it was just a big barracks bag.
Okay.
And but we had a backpack, but that didn't amount to much compared to the bag, you
Yeah.
know. But we didn't. So we got off at Le Havre, France, and we were back in in another barracks type situation there. Then it was getting close to Christmas time. We got into, they took us to Metz, Germany, and that's where my buddy and I were separated. And I went to another outfit, and we don't recall exactly. Boy, we're going to go back 60 years here, Frank. But I know what happened.
Okay,
but
yeah, that's all.
I can't
Yeah.
put a date with it.
No, don't worry about it.
But I know our Thanksgiving dinner was on the boat going over. I know that. So
Okay.
that was Thanksgiving time.
Okay.
Now we're crowding Christmas time, and we were loaded on a train, and at Le Havre, France. No, they weren't coaches. They were box cars, and some didn't even have all the boards on them. And we loaded and called them the old 40 and 8s, you know, 40 men and 8 horses. And that's just about the truth, I guess. We got on that, and we rode that for 2 nights, 2 days, I think, or longer.
Were there stops? I mean, rest stops?
Only time they would stop would be if there was and I don't know how they got the signal that there was some aircraft in the air, German aircraft, and then they would stop the train or pull in at a little town alongside the buildings to shelter it from otherwise we'd right out in the open. And it was now there's snow on the ground. It's frosty cold. And you'd wake up in the morning and the frost was standing out on the rivets on that old car. Well, all we had with us was what rations we had in on us. There
This
was
is like C rations, K rations, the kind you have the little can, you open it up and
yeah, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And there was no kitchens along the way, nothing hot whatsoever. And we rode that, and the last night was Christmas Eve.
the car that you were in, the box car that you were in, was it closed, or was it actually, since you said some of them were?
Well, there was a door.
Yeah.
There was a door on it, and we could roll the door
Oh,
shut.
okay.
It's a big old sliding door.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of them didn't have all the boards on it. We were fortunate we had all the boards on ours.
Okay. All right.
Some of the guys even took when that train would stop, we'd always jump off, you know, to relieve yourself or whatever you had to do. And they found an old stove in one little town that they stopped in. They took that stove and stuck it in the corner of their car, and then they took the waste of the padding out of the boxes on the bearings of the train wheels, put it in there, try to get a fire going. And the next, they got the fire going. Next morning, those guys looked like jigaboos, you know. They just got themselves all smoked up.
Oh, my.
But we spent Christmas Eve in that, I recall that, and I had a little harmonica in my pack, and
You could play a harmonica?
yeah, and I still do. I still do. But I played, Christmas carols, and the guys sang.
That's great. So eventually, you arrived somewhere.
We arrived at Neuchâtel, France.
Okay.
We missed our Christmas dinner, and we were welcomed to the Army's Hilton there, which was a horse stable with clean straw in the stalls. And we had rations for that supper that night because the service was gone. And
Was this pretty much a bombed out town?
yeah, most of the towns we hit were bombed
Yeah.
out. And what buildings were usable, they tried to use them
Yeah.
for this purpose.
But so far, no seeing or hearing the enemy, right? There's no engagement with the enemy or anything.
No, oh no.
Okay.
No, and we were kind of, at that time, we got to the place, if you was a mile or two from the enemy, you was pretty safe country. And we were miles there. But it was there when we drew our weapons in Neuchâtel, France. And of course we had a lovely place to sleep in the horse stall, but we did have a kitchen there, so we had warm breakfast the next morning. And then we drew our weapons, and it was kind of a joke. Everybody hated the thought of having to clean up a weapon because the weapons come out of preservation, stuff, cosmoline that they had them coated with. Well, that was like taking tar off from something when it's cold, and we were right out in the open. We wasn't in no heat.
What did you carry? What was your weapon?
Well, there's where I lucked out. And why I was assigned a 41 millimeter gunner spec number, and I did have that training back in basic camp, and so I knew how to shoot. But I was awarded a 45 automatic, which was pretty small, and the other guys had them big old M1 rifles, and to clean one of those with no cleaning equipment, so you use some of your clothes to clean them with, and they had to be clean so they would fire, and then we had to qualify on a makeshift range the next day. So that was our next experience there, to qualify with those weapons. So I always thought I was kind of lucky drawing the smallest one of the bet. Yeah.
But there had to be a certain amount of apprehension now. I mean, giving you weapons, that means you're about to go use them.
Well, we knew that. We knew we was going to get there one way or the other. But the question where and when. And after we drew our weapons and got all squared away with that, and then they would come in and ask for so many guys.
Was the officers or the sergeant or?
Yeah, whoever is in charge.
Okay.
And they, I don't know if there's any rhyme or rhythm the way they do that. And I suppose they looked again at your records, found out what do you got, and if they had a request for so many of this, so many of that. If you were infantry, you would just went out in that area. And so we finally told that we were going to be assigned. And so then now it's getting close to New Year's. And so it was 60, 70 miles in the back of an open truck. There was 3 of us that went to the 6th Armored Division at that time, the 86th Recon. And
oh, so we're back to recon now.
we're at,
Oh,
yeah, this is
boy.
where it all come back to
Oh,
me.
boy.
Yeah, but it was all right. We got there Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve. So what a way to start the new year. And
Well, what did you when you arrived? What were you arriving to? What was there?
a bombed out town,
Okay.
buildings that were only half there, and the old man or the company commander, he had a part of an old bombed out building, and that's where his headquarters was. And so I was met by the guard outside the door, and we got out of that truck, and all we had to wrap in the truck was a blanket. We wrapped the blanket around us, So I was almost froze when I got there, but
sure.
so I went in, and he took me in, introduced me to the captain, and one thing he said, well, Doren, my records followed me again. So he said, Doren, I understand that you've been a mechanic, and Yeah, that's true. I worked mechanic in civilian life. And they said, okay, so I'll sign you in the morning. Okay. So he told the corporal to find a place for me to sleep. And so I found another cold room to sleep in for the night. In the morning I got up and the kitchen was with us at that time, and I went down to the kitchen and had chow. Then he took me down to the motor pool and introduced me to the motor sergeant. And the first thing the motor sergeant noticed that I was carrying a brand new 45. And he says, where in the H did you get that? I said, that was assigned to me. Boy, he says, you're going to lose it sure as the world. He said, you got officers walking around with carbines here and rifles, so he says, you're going to lose it. So after chow, he said to me, he said, I'll make you a deal. And I said, what's the deal? He said, I'll swap with you. He had an old 45. He'd found it. So that's what he was carrying. And I said, well, I said, just so I don't get that on my charge, I don't want to have to pay for that crazy thing. He said, I'll take care of that. So I swapped with him. So when I went back up to talk with the old man later that day, one of the first things he said, Doren, when you were in here last night, you was carrying a new weapon. Yeah, I was. He said, what happened to it? I traded with the sergeant. Oh. And I thought the sergeant was going to get in trouble about that time. But he come to the sergeant and he said, you're going to have to turn that in. So he made the sergeant turn it in. One of the officers wanted that, see. They wanted to carry that instead of a rifle. So he said to me, he says, we'll find a rifle for you. So I had an old M1 for a while there. The armorer, the guy that took care of the guns, he traveled with a maintenance group. So it wasn't long, and he picked up a carbine, and so I carried that the rest of my combat time. I'd rather have that than that 45 anyway. I could hit something with a carbine. But
so what were your duties during this time? You were fixing Jeeps or trucks?
Well,
or?
The unit had probably 100 vehicles altogether. You know, armored cars, Jeeps, half-tracks. We traveled mainly in the half-track. And later on, we had a couple light tanks attached to us. But we were the reconnaissance mechanized, as they called it. In other words, we moved on by wheels as much as we could. And can I take time out to blow my nose?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'll grab some coffee, too.
Packed up and gone home for the night, you know.
Yeah.
That'd have been duck soup.
Yeah.
But to have to crawl back in the barracks and,
Sure.
and stay with it all, that's what bothered me more than anything.
Yeah. You must have thought a lot about wife and family while you were... Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's try and describe the motor. You called it the motor pool, but I assume it wasn't a formal motor pool. It's just an area you'd set up to
Right.
to fix all
Right.
this stuff. What were your generally? What were the problems? What were the breakdowns?
Probably flat tires. I you know, I got so adept at fixing tires that it wasn't funny. And we didn't have air wrenches like they do today, so everything was done by hand. And usually it was flak from shells, you know. And I've seen more than once a Jeep coming across the field. All four tires are flat, and those wheels were so designed that the tires wouldn't come off. You had to take the wheel apart in two pieces to get the tire off. And so they'd come through and the tires would be just a flopping, but they'd hang on.
So let me get an idea now. You're moving through France towards Germany,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You're talking about Jeeps and trucks and half tracks, and you would move forward and then stop and then a group would go off and do reconnaissance, or what were you guys doing? I guess is what I'm besides just moving along.
Uh, a lot of times parts of us were assigned to other units. So a lot of times there were tanks moving with us, and there'd be a whole column of equipment moving up. And you move along. I never could understand, as you know, before I got into service, I'd read the paper and I'd hear it on the news. Well, they took so many towns today. And I never realized what Germany looked like until I got there. And I thought, my goodness, how can they do that, you know? But over there, you had these little hamlets every few miles, you know, sometimes 8, 10 miles. Here's another town, and sometimes less than that. And so as a column would move in, we'd find white sheets or something come out of the windows. And we were pretty safe. We got caught on it more than once, but when we seen that happen, we'd move right on through, and we'd keep right on going. And a lot of times they would trick us, you know. They would get us in there and then catch us from the rear, and then we had to defend ourselves.
What was your first experience in battle?
Well,
That's right. If you want to take.
I can see the first morning after when we started to move out of that area where I was assigned, and the first morning, and I was on the back of a half track. There was a 50 caliber machine gun in a mount on the top, a 30 on the back, and quite often I would ride on the back by that machine gun. And so I was just sitting on there, kind of watching the scenery go by, and we hadn't gone far at all. Of course, now we didn't plow roads there; you just plowed through it, and so the snow was deep. And I can remember, I looked down, and here was a German soldier, and I still see his blue eyes, gray hair, froze stiff. One arm was sticking up through the snow. That still haunts me.
When you were traveling along, was there sounds? Was there gunfire or explosions in the background? Did you know that something was going on?
Oh yeah.
All right.
Yeah, you knew it, and you knew the difference between one of our machine guns and the Germans. At night you could tell the difference because of the tracers.
Yeah.
One was sort of a white tracer, and the other was yellow. And so if you seen tracers going through the air, you knew who they were and which way they was going. Yeah. And there was always, and then lots of times we'd move along, and the Germans would have that location pegged, and all of a sudden the shells would come in, and then we'd have to scatter again. And
where do you go to hide in snow and cold and shells coming in? And
well, any place you think would be good. We were moving through a little town one night, and once again I was sitting on the back of that half track, and as it kind of went through town, of course the old most of the buildings were all stone and masonry, and just at the far edge of town the point vehicle ran right into a German patrol, and boy, things started to cut loose. And it was kind of like 4th of July in New York City, and I jumped off the back of that half track and backed up against the wall, and there was a little pocket in that wall, and I just backed in there and watched that stuff go by, you know, and it would ricochet off the buildings. So there was no safe place, so you just did the best you could. And so we, but those are the things you just took cover whatever way you could. A lot of guys would crawl underneath the vehicle, I've slept underneath the front bumper of that old thing many times because you was safe from shells coming in. It had a pretty good bumper on it, and from the buildings there had a lot of tile roofs. So when we get shelled and they hit that tile roof, that was like a hailstorm, you know. It just rattled and clattered.
Now you've got a helmet,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. You kept
You've
it on
got
your head.
You got your gun, and
Yeah.
was this a constant? In other words, you were talking about going to these hamlets, some of them had the white flag or just the white sheets
Yeah.
and whatnot.
Yeah.
But as you're moving forward day to day, was encountering the enemy a daily, or was it just every few days you'd run into them, or?
Well, it was spasmodic, you know. You never knew when they was gonna. You never knew what was going to be over the next hill, out of the next woods. There was a lot of woods there, and it always was sort of spooky, traveling through the woods because those trees were all planted, and they were all rowed, and they would have a gun sitting back here, so they'd wait till the column starts through there and fire right down through them rows of trees. You see, so you're kind of a sitting duck a lot of times.
Any close calls?
Very close.
Yeah.
Yeah. Through the, I guess the closest, well, you never knew how close it was. We always said if you hear a bullet whistle, you didn't have to worry about it because it's out there ways. If you heard just a sharp crack, you better get down because that baby's close to you. If it got close to your head, it was just a sharp crack. But we were kind of got caught in an ambush one time, and they had ACAC guns, which they used for the aircraft, and they would lower those down, and just bang, 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 you know, and then they would go out so far and explode, and then that stuff would come down on you. And I was riding with a motor sergeant one day, and a piece of that went right down the seat, right between us, you know. Now, I guess what is close, it missed, and that's what counts, you know. And I never can actually say I got wounded, and I'm fortunate for that. But many times that when we finally had time to curl up to go to sleep, you know, you had blood here and you had blood there. You did something. You don't know what you did. You just kind of wrapped it up and forgot about it. And as long as you was able to walk.
How were you supplied?
Well, the supply truck tried to get to us. We had both for supply for food and for fuel. That was the big one. And
So somebody would come up from the back, so to speak,
Oh,
from
yeah.
your trail,
yeah,
and you guys would stop, and then they would resupply you.
yeah, and usually every day if the gas truck was with us, which was a truck just packed with GI gas cans, you know, and they could pile. I don't know how many was on that. There was just hundreds of them on there, and that was you know, just to drive one of them trucks was a pretty dangerous mission because, boy, you one tracer shell in that tank and it's gone, and they would come up by the vehicles wherever the vehicles were. They usually were kind of encircled and sort of. And how many cans do you need? They just throw off so many cans that the guys need to fill their vehicles, and that's how we supplied the gasoline.
What happened to the dead and the wounded?
Well, the medics were with us. They did what they could, and there was a lot of times they were just left because knowing somebody be coming up behind us, and there was people that took care of them.
So there was a whole, the people would come up from behind you, they'd be able to pick up the wounded or the dead, and then they'd bring them back.
They take them
Okay,
back, yeah.
all right, all right.
Hopefully, and without getting into trouble, you know.
Sure.
After we crossed the Rhine River, the general had a little powwow with everybody, and never thought that was a wise move, but he did it anyway. And the whole unit, I don't know how many of there was there, but our whole unit was there. And for a group to get together in a congested area at a time like that wasn't good. We had aircraft support over us watching, and he gave us a pep talk about crossing the Rhine River.
Who was this? General?
Well, General Grohl was
okay.
our
All right.
general there. Of course, he was in Patton's army. He was, well, you heard him different times, but and he was a different guy, and the term blood and guts, I guess, was probably pretty accurate for him. And a while back, I read the history of the 6th Armored Division and some of the things that he did, and by the Army standards, he would have been court-martialed for what he did, but because he literally defied orders. And that's what happened at the Rhine River. We got down to the river, and then the Germans were the engineers had put a pontoon bridge across, and they were trying to come back at night and bomb that. And of course, they kept a smoke screen going, so that was just solid smoke in there. But they still try and drop bombs and hit it. And so we finally got across the river, and what the general had said at that meeting was, if you get across, go just as far as you can, as fast as you can. And a half track would ramble along pretty good speed. We had our half track. We had a two-wheel trailer behind us full of spare parts. We looked like there was a movie on it. He run a junkyard, and he always had stuff hanging on his truck. And that's kind of what we looked like, because if we'd have a Jeep get blowed off the road, we'd stop and knock the wheels off, take the wheels off, just hang them on, because we needed them. But we got across the river and we started moving, and we went as far as we could until we hit an ambush, and we got in this little town, and a Jeep was going to go back and get mail and pick up some supplies, and he got just outside of town and they blew him off the road. Then we knew we had a problem. So we held that town for 5 days. The first word that came to us was when Franklin Roosevelt died. That was the date of that. But we held the town, and every night we'd walk. It was just another little hamlet again, and there was a lot of prisoners, and there was a lot of German soldiers in there. So every night we took prisoners. You know, they would try to move around at night, and we could nail them that way. So every morning there was usually a line of them that was lined up and interrogated. But ironic thing happened there. After 5 days, all of a sudden a tank column come moving in, and he was I don't know what his rank was, but he stood up on top of that, and I heard him holler, where's the commander of this outfit? And so they went and got him, and he come out, and his first remark was, he says, I was supposed to take this town. We got ahead of him by 5 days. So you see, we had a little competition going there, even amongst the officers. But I always laughed about that. I thought, well, that shows how childish some of them really were. He was mad because he didn't take the town, and we'd held it for 5 days. It wasn't an easy one, because we lost some men there, and but we put out our outpost, and we walked the streets, and as you'd walk, you'd hear a noise, and you know it's somebody moving. And of course, we never walked side by side. We always walked one just ahead of the other, and we'd walk through by these doorways, and I always was scared of the doorways, watch for the doorways, and then you get a little ways and all of a sudden you'd hear that in back of you, you knew good well that somebody had gotten around you again. So every night there was prisoners taken there.
The civilians were all gone.